Johnny Talk Sports in with my NFL Mock Draft 3.0. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, the Jaguars are the first overall pick, and their pick is pretty obvious here. Trevor Lawrence, the quarterback out of Clemson. The Jaguars get their franchise quarterback of the future in Trevor Lawrence, and the Jaguars also another pick later on this first round from the Jalen Ramsey trade. So now this is where the real NFL draft begins. What do the Jets do with the second overall pick? Do they go with a quarterback, whether it's Zach Wilson or Justin Fields? Or do they go with Penei Sewell? Or do they take one of the wide receivers? It depends on how the Jets feel on draft night, because there are reports that Sam Darnold has received trade offers. And could it be from the 49ers? Could it be from the Broncos? Because the Broncos aren't necessarily sold on Drew Lock moving forward. While the 49ers, are they fully committed to Jimmy Garoppolo? I personally think the 49ers, they are pretty committed to Garoppolo as their QB1 going into next season. So I think the 49ers will be out of the Sam Darnold sweepstakes. But I think the Jets go with Zach Wilson out of BYU. Now the Jets also have the Seattle Seahawks first-round pick in this NFL draft from the Jamal Adams trade. Now we go to the Dolphins, and they have a tough decision to make. Do they go with Penei Sewell to build protection for Tua Tagovailoa, or do they go with Devontae Smith or Jamar Chase or even Jalen Waddle? I think they're going to go with Devontae Smith. I just think reuniting him with Tua Tagovailoa, I think it could be the smartest pick the Dolphins could have, although I wouldn't blame them if they took Sewell here. But I think Devontae Smith, when you pair him back out with Tua Tagovailoa, bring them back together, reunite them, they trust each other, they've won a national championship, and I think it make Tua a better quarterback in the NFL. Next, we have the Falcons on the clock, and Arthur Smith, the Falcons, it's being reported that they are not expected to move on from Matt Ryan and Julio Jones going to next season. And I think that Arthur Smith, he clearly wants to work with Matt Ryan because Arthur Smith, he turned around Ryan Tannehill's career. And I think he can easily really get Matt Ryan back to that MVP form from 2016. I think the one thing that's holding him back is the offensive line. The Falcons tried to address their help with the offensive line by drafting Lindstrom and McGarry in the first round back in 2019. But I think with Sewell on the board at 4, I think they take the chance on him and go with Penei Sewell, the offensive tackle out of Oregon, with the 4th overall pick. Next, we have the Bengals with the 5th overall pick. And I think they go with what I think is the smartest decision with the way this draft is playing out so far. And that is to go with Jamar Chase, the wide receiver out of LSU. Same situation with Miami. When you reunite Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, they trust each other. They've won a national championship. And I think it make Joe Burrow a better quarterback. Next, we have the Eagles. And the Eagles, no matter who the quarterback's going to be in 2021, whether if it's Carson Wentz, because there have been reports that Carson Wentz is expected to be traded at some point as early as this week, or if it's going to be Jalen Hurts, or if it's going to be somebody they draft in later rounds, they're going to need a wide receiver 1. The Eagles, they made a mistake last year by going with Rager instead of Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson almost won Rookie of the Year, and I think they go with Jalen Waddle to redeem themselves. Although Kyle Pitts could be a possibility there for the Eagles, but I think Waddle is the best option at this point. Next, we have the Lions on the clock, and with the 3 wide receivers, the big 3 of Smith, Chase, and Waddle off the board, I think they address their next biggest need, and that is a corner, and they go with Patrick Surtain out of Alabama. Now, pretty much every wide receiver on the Lions roster is a free agent this season, but I do think the Lions will, in all likelihood, franchise tag Kenny Golladay And I think they're going to try to look for wide receiver in a later round. So this will be the second year in a row the Lions have drafted a corner with their first round pick. They took Okudah last year, and they are taking Surtain, at least in this mock draft, with the way the draft is playing out. If one of those three is still on the board, I think that's what the Lions will do at pick 7. But if all three of them are off the board by the time it gets to their turn, I think they will take Surtain. Next, we have the Panthers. And which quarterback do they take here? Do they take Fields or do they take Lance? I'm thinking they may go with Trey Lance, but I think with Fields still on the board, I think with him still there, I think it's really worth taking a chance on Justin Fields. Despite Ohio State quarterbacks not having good history with the NFL, I think Justin Fields has potential to break that curse. I think they go with Justin Fields here out of Ohio State. Next, we have the Broncos on the clock, and A.J. Bouye and the Broncos are expected to mutually part ways in this offseason. So I think they address their biggest need here, and that's a corner, and they go with Caleb Farley out of Virginia Tech. With getting a corner, A.J. Bouye being a free agent, and with the Broncos secondary really struggling in 2020, I think they go with a corner. I think this is that smart pick for the Broncos. Although with Trey Lance, they could take a chance, as Drew Lock isn't really the starting quarterback moving forward. They're not that fully committed to him. But next we have the Cowboys on the clock, and I think they're going to address their needs in the secondary as well by going with J.C. Horn, the cornerback out of South Carolina. Now, the Cowboys secondary, well, their defense as a whole, it was abysmal, but their secondary was a lot worse. A lot of quarterbacks are able to have a field day on this Cowboys defense, in particular the secondary. So I think they take J.C. Horn. I think he can be a future lockdown corner in this league. And the Cowboys draft a corner. Next, we have the Giants on the clock. And the Giants, I think they're going to address one of the biggest needs, and that is going to be a wide receiver. So I think they're going to go with Bateman out of Minnesota. I just think that the Giants, they need to find – well, the Giants, I think, are an underrated team. And they have a lot of potential with their offense. I could see this pick also being an offensive tackle. I think it could be Micah Parsons as well. I think those are possibilities as well. Because the Giants had a chance to draft Isaiah Simmons at number 4 last year, but they passed on him and took Andrew Thomas. Now, with the pick possibly an offensive tackle, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I know an offensive tackle isn't the best and most exciting pick for the first round, but think about how the Cowboys became one of the best offensive lines in the National Football League. They would draft an offensive tackle every single round. They would draft one every single year in the first round. And I think with Jason Garrett being the offensive coordinator, I think that could be a move they make as well. But Rashad Bateman, it could be considered a reach with the way Bateman is at. But I think with the big 3 off the board, I think this could be a solid spot for him, 11th overall. Next, we have the 49ers on the clock. I think they'll go with Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC with the top 3 corners off the board in Surtain, Farley, and Horn off the board. I think they go with their second biggest need, and they'll possibly wait for a later round to take a corner. Next, we have the Chargers, and I think the Chargers are going to go with Rashawn Slater, the offensive tackle out of Northwestern. I just think this is a smart pick here for the Chargers to build protection for your franchise quarterback in Justin Herbert. And Justin Herbert had a really impressive rookie season. And I think to make him continue to go on performances like that season after season is to build protection around him within your offensive line. Although with Brandon Staley, the new head coach, with him being a defensive mind, maybe they address a need on defense. But I think this is the smart pick here. Next, we have the Vikings on the clock, and I think they're going to go with Christian Darrisaw, the offensive tackle out of Virginia Tech. I just think the Vikings need help with that offensive line. And I think Christian Darrisaw, I think he will fit that bill nicely for the Vikings. Next, we have the Patriots on the clock. I think the Patriots, they will do the typical Patriots pick here. They address their biggest need at the tight end position. Now, whether the QB is going to be, whether they trade for one in this offseason, like, for example, could they be a dark horse candidate for Deshaun Watson? Although if they were to get Deshaun Watson, they most likely wouldn't have this pick because the Texans, they most likely want 3 first-round picks in return. Because we saw the Rams give up 2 first-round picks from Matthew Stafford. But I think with this pick, they'll go with Kyle Pitts out of Florida. Best player available in this draft. I could possibly the Chargers maybe going with Kyle Pitts as well, depending on if they re-sign Hunter Henry in the offseason. But at this point, I am guessing that Hunter Henry will re-sign with the Chargers because Herbert really likes him as a target. Justin Herbert targeted him a lot throughout the season in 2020. So I think Hunter Henry re-signs with the Chargers. That's why I had them passing on Kyle Pitts. But if they don't re-sign Henry, then I think Kyle Pitts will be the pick at 13 for the Chargers. Next, we have the Cardinals on the clock. And I think they're going to address the need at the cornerback position because Patrick Peterson and the Cardinals are expected to part ways in this offseason. Now, this pick may seem like a bit of a reach, but Asante Samuel Jr. out of Florida State. We have seen a couple of corners in the past, in recent memory. It feels like that they are a reach. We have seen Gladney. I feel like Jeff Gladney was a little bit of a reach when the Vikings drafted him. We've seen A.J. Terrell. We have seen Gary Conley. So there have been corners in the past that we have seen that felt like a reach. So the Cardinals, this pick is a gamble, but I think this is a gamble that is worth it. Next, we have the Raiders on the clock. I think the Raiders address their biggest need, and that is edge rushing, and they go with Kwity Paye, the edge rusher out of Michigan. Now, it is possible the Raiders, they could maybe make a case for signing J.J. Watt. But I think Kwity Paye here is the smart pick. The Raiders address their biggest need and the best player available among their needs. Next, we have the Dolphins on the clock, and I think they will go with Najee Harris, the running back out of Alabama. And I think Najee Harris, although we don't really see that many running backs go in the first round in the draft anymore, I think Najee Harris, I think he's going to be taken within the first maybe 20, 25 picks. I think if Najee Harris falls outside the top 25, then at that point, he would be a steal. I think the Dolphins look at a steal here. And also, Najee Harris, another player to reunite with Tua Tagovailoa. Now, Najee Harris, he is a 3-down back the Dolphins can really use. So far, the Dolphins are having a pretty good draft by going with Smith and Harris in the first round. Next, we have the Washington football team. And the Washington football team, they address their need at quarterback. And I think they go with Trey Lance out of North Dakota State. Now, if Trey Lance was off the board, I think they would go with offensive tackle, most likely Samuel Cosmi, or they could go with Liam Eichenberg, or they can go with Tevin Jenkins. But I think with Lance on the board, I think they'd take their chance with Trey Lance here. Alex Smith, it's unknown if he's going to return to Washington, although they said they wanted to come back in 2021. And Heineke is expected to come back to the Washington football team. So I'm going to go with them going with Trey Lance. They'll probably have a QB battle between Alex Smith and Trey Lance to see who's QB1. I think whoever doesn't win that battle will be QB2, then Heineke at 3. Next, we have the Bears on the clock, and I think they address their needs on the offensive line. I think they're going to go with Liam Eichenberg, the offensive tackle of Notre Dame. Notre Dame had one of the best offensive lines in college football this past season, and a big part of that was because of Liam Eichenberg. Next, we have the Colts on the clock. I think the Colts, they address their need at wide receiver, and I think they will go with Kadarius Toney out of Florida. The Colts are just a couple pieces away from being a legitimate Super Bowl contender, and one of them is a quarterback. With the quarterbacks off the board right now, I just think the Colts, they just take a piece, and whoever the quarterback's going to be in 2021, whether it's Carson Wentz or Jacoby Brissett, or if they draft a quarterback in a later round, give him a go-to receiver. Kadarius Toney fits that bill. He's got speed, and I think Toney will fit the bill here for the Colts. Next, we have the Titans on the clock. I think they will address their needs at the edge rusher position. They'll go with Gregory Rousseau, the edge rusher out of Miami. The Titans are desperate for pass rush. And Rousseau, I believe it around this time last season, Rousseau was projected to be in the top 10. So the Titans, they could be getting a steal here with Gregory Rousseau. Next, we have the Jets on the clock. And I think the Jets are going to go with a wide receiver because they had drafted Zach Wilson. So it's best to give Zach Wilson a wideout to go to, and that is Rondale Moore out of Purdue. Now, this could be a little bit of reach as well, but I think this pick will be worth it for the Jets because Rondale Moore can play running back. He can play wide receiver. So I think Rondale Moore could be a big X factor for the Jets moving forward. And this pick could feel like a reach, but I think this pick is worth it for the Jets. Next, we have the Steelers on the clock, and the Steelers, they go with Travis Etienne, the running back out of Clemson. With James Conner, a free agent, I think the Steelers, they take a running back here, although I think the pick could be offensive tackle, which that would be the next pick I had in mind. Maybe Samuel Cosmi could be the pick, or maybe it could be Tevin Jenkins. I think it depends on, or even Alex Leatherwood. But I think Etienne to the Steelers, I think that is a really solid pickup for the Steelers. Next, we have the Jaguars. Now, this is the Rams pick from the Jalen Ramsey trade. So I think the Jaguars, by drafting Trevor Lawrence, you draft protection for him, and they go with Alex Leatherwood, the offensive tackle out of Alabama. And now the Browns are on the clock, and I think they address their needs at edge rusher, and they'll go with Jalen Phillips out of Miami. Now, that is a huge pick for the Browns. It complements Myles Garrett. It really boosts up their defensive line. The Browns, they got to prove they're not just a one-year wonder, and they can win and make the playoffs consistently. So I think the Browns with Jalen Phillips complement Myles Garrett. Next, we have the Ravens on the clock, and I think they're going to go with Terrence Marshall Jr. out of LSU. This complements Marquise Hollywood Brown, and Lamar Jackson has another weapon to throw to, Terrence Marshall Jr. He wasn't really talked about that much in 2019 as he was really overshadowed by Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. But Terrence Marshall had a really good season for LSU. One of the best receivers in the SEC conference. I'd say the best wide receiver that wasn't on the Alabama roster. So Terrence Marshall at 27 to the Ravens. Next, we have the Saints on the clock, and I think they're going to go with a corner here, and that is Eric Stokes out of Georgia. Marshawn Lattimore. The Saints defense, it has a little bit of holes they need to address. I think a corner to Marshawn Lattimore. I think that's one of them. Next, we have the Packers. I think the Packers, they are going to go with Greg Newsome II out of Northwestern. I just feel like with corners coming off the board, I just think that the Packers, I think they're going to be in panic mode, trying to get the best corner they can. Next, we have the Bills on the clock, and I think the Bills are going to get a big steal here. Go with Micah Parsons, the linebacker to Penn State. We always see prospects very often where they are projected to be drafted really high, but they fall off the board. And I think this year that could be Micah Parsons. Although realistically, I think Micah Parsons could be around the area of possibly around maybe 11 to possibly 18 or 19 to maybe even the Jets maybe at 23. But Micah Parsons, the Bills, the 31st overall pick, the Chiefs. We saw their offensive line in the Super Bowl, and it needs help. So I have them going with Wyatt Davis out of Ohio State. And we have the Super Bowl champions, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I think they just go with their biggest need, as a lot of the players, a lot of the talent from this Super Bowl winning team, they're expected to come back, like Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski, Antonio Brown. So I think they go with Joseph Ossai, the edge rusher out of Texas. So that concludes my first round 3.0 mock draft.